Hello, Bobcats. This is Mr. Buckman with Friday morning, September 4th's video, which is replacing our Zoom lesson for both reading and writing. This will be for Friday, September 4th. Remember, this is a half day. Unfortunately, I am not able to do a Zoom lesson because I am working from home and my computer can't handle so many students on a Zoom call, okay? In any case, what we're going to be talking about is word choice and tone. What I mean by this is an author, when you're reading a text, you'll find certain words that the author has used to try to invoke a certain type of tone or a certain type of meaning or emotion that's associated with that word. And that's what this video is about. It's about how authors, and for my writing class, this will include you as well, use different types of words to convey a certain type of emotion, okay? So before we get into our readings from Egypt game, I wanted to show you a few boards that I have that kind of describes a roadmap that authors can use in order to come up with some of these words, okay? In order to think about using words when you're writing, but also recognizing what kind of tone the author is trying to strike by using certain words. And actually before I get into this, I'd like for you to think of the times that you've ever watched a scary movie, okay? Anytime you've ever watched a scary movie and there will be a scene and nothing scary has happened quite yet, but in a scene, you can maybe sometimes start to hear a violin coming in, playing a very dark and ominous chord. Maybe a minor chord, something that sounds sad or dark. And usually what will happen is that music will sometimes kick in before the event that is supposed to really scare you, okay? And what a filmmaker is doing in that situation is using music to set the tone, okay? It wouldn't be as powerful of a scene in that movie if it's supposed to scare you, and before the scaring scene arrives, the music comes on and it's really silly, like something you'd hear in a circus. Like if it went, that's not the music that you would play before a scary scene. That would set a different type of tone, okay? Now that's filmmaking. We're talking about literature here, okay? So what you can do with words and the words that you choose, you can set a certain tone or emotion. If you're reading, you can recognize that from the author. You can also use that when you're the author, okay? So when you get to a point in a story, when an author gets to a certain point in a story, they have a choice that they can make to use certain words. And what you can do is you can use words that have either a positive connotation or a positive association or a negative association. We briefly discussed this on Thursday's Zoom lesson, okay? Now let's assume that we picked a word that it has a positive association. We can invoke emotions such as joy, fun, excitement, kindness, or a feeling of belonging, okay? A sense of purpose. These are all positive and good emotions, right? We can also choose to use words that have a negative association or a negative connotation, and those might invoke emotions such as anger, fear, loneliness, disgust. I think you guys get what I mean. By choosing these words or reading these words, you can find out what kind of tone the author is trying to strike, okay? Now, for those of you in my writing class that are in the process of writing a mystery short story, it's very important that you actually use word choice to build suspense, okay? Now, yes, you can use words to create positive feelings like happiness, joy, fun, excitement, like we just talked about. But in a mystery, especially those of you that are doing maybe a darker mystery, we're getting close to Halloween and everything, right? You can have somebody go into a garage. That might be a part of your story. But if you just use one additional word and you say that it's a dark garage, Or perhaps you can see that the lights are flickering, right? You can create a sense of suspense or even fear in the reader. And that is a very powerful thing to do as an author. Another example would be, it's enough to just say that we're walking down the hallway, right? But what if you're trying to make it sound like the character is anxious or nervous about what they're doing? You can say the narrow hallway, okay? It's not wide. It's actually quite narrow. So this invokes not only an idea of what the hallway looks like physically, but it might also tell us that they're feeling claustrophobic or that they have nowhere else to run. This is important, okay? Another great example would be like a creaking door. It would be enough for us to say that a character opens a door. But if you're trying to open a door and something's going to jump out and scare the reader, or if they're going to find a surprise, if you're trying to create more suspense, you might want to use a word like a creaking door. A creaking door, okay? I will post those two boards online so you understand what I'm talking about by word choice. But what we need to do next is we have to talk about examples, and I have two of them from the Egypt game, okay? Let's talk about these. Now, I have two texts right here. If you'll take a look, right here on page 120, I have underlined the parts of this passage in which we're trying to figure out if the author is trying to use terms that have a positive or a negative association. That will be right over here, okay? And then we also want to try to see what kind of emotion. Yes, we can say that the word or the phrase has a negative or positive association, but we need to also think about what kind of emotion is the author trying to invoke in the reader, okay? So let's take a look at the text from page 120. It was easy to tell by looking at Toby's dark eyes that, and here's where the underlined passage comes, something important was going on, end quote. All right, now I look at this, if I look at the underlined passage, that it means that something important is going on. What they're talking about here is the children have invited both Ken and Toby, and if you'll remember, Toby is the boy that's really excited about the game, about the Egypt game, and he has a lot of really great ideas to add to this game, right? This has a positive association, okay? If the story was a little bit different, okay, we could possibly look at this passage and it might have a negative association, but the reason that it's positive is we've already been told by the author that Toby's excited about the game, that Toby's thinking about the game, and he's trying to bring new ideas to the game, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and say this passage, at least the underlined part, has a positive association, okay? You might hear me use the word connotation as well. We'll go into what connotation means later on in the year, but this is definitely a positive association, okay? What kind of tone are we trying to set? What kind of emotion are we trying to invoke by using this phrase? Well, I think that we're trying to invoke a feeling of excitement in the other players of the Egypt game. Excitement about, specifically, Toby's ideas, okay? This is excitement about Toby's ideas, all right? Something important is going on. He's thinking, April, Melanie, Marshall, and Elizabeth, they know that Toby likes history a lot, and he might have a lot to bring to this game. So they are excited. This passage has a positive association, and that positive emotion is excitement. Let's look at another passage over here on page 139. This passage begins, and you'll see I have this underlined here, his wet feathers stuck to his tiny body, and he was covered with a thick, white, salty scum. Now, this is a very descriptive passage here, and I think that you guys understand that, especially this last part here, This has more of a negative association. I think you guys would agree on that. You'll notice I've also got the plus sign and the minus sign. I hope that doesn't confuse you guys. It just means positive and negative, okay? But we can also take this part of the passage, his wet feathers stuck to his tiny body. They're trying to paint this image of this bird being just pretty much quite pathetic, right? And the people looking at this bird are shocked. They're shocked by kind of just how awful this bird looks, by how pathetic and awful this bird looks, okay? So we would say that this passage has a negative association, okay? They're trying to paint a negative picture, but let's be more specific. What kind of emotion are we trying to invoke? What kind of emotion is the author trying to invoke? What is the tone or the emotion? Well, I believe here, when people see this bird, there's a sense of alarm in the book, right? They're like kind of shocked by how pathetic this bird looks. So I would say just kind of a sense of alarm at how awful the bird looked, right? Can you read all that? Yes. So this is just kind of, they're shocked. They are alarmed. They were not expecting this, okay? This is a sense of surprise. Now, we can also have an emotion of surprise like in a birthday party. But obviously, if we were trying to invoke the emotion of surprise, and if it was positive, and we were trying to tell somebody happy birthday and we were surprising them, we wouldn't tell them they had a tiny body and that they were covered with thick, white, salty scum. We just wouldn't do that, right? We would think of some other words to set a different tone or a different emotion. I hope that this video makes sense for you. I do want to remind you, there are no additional writing assignments for my writing class on Friday. Now, in your template, your schedule for the week, it said that we were going to post due dates and rubrics for your mystery short story. We have decided to wait on that and communicate those ideas to you next week when we're in person and it makes a little bit more sense to you. That does not mean that you cannot work on your short story. If you feel like you'd like to work on it, please do so, okay? Also, do not try to do easy grammar page 8. Why? Because we already did it last week, okay? One last reminder for my reading class. In reading, you have an exit ticket on Google Classroom. 3 questions about Greek and Latin roots. Make sure you get that done before Tuesday. Thanks again, guys. I hope you have a wonderful 3-day weekend.